Hello and welcome to Kerbal Space Program. Recently, India set a world record with launching 104 satellites into orbit on one launcher. They were all CubeSats, very small things. And this launcher here is, 247 tons to launch my own 256 satellites into orbit on one launch. Each satellite consists of a probe core, a solar panel, a sepatron, which are all aimed inwards to blow them out from the central stack, and a decoupler, because I would increase debris quite a bit more if I made the decouplers the double-sided ones, and I don't want to do that. This probe core is the root part for this rocket. It's on the central post, which provides some stability through some additional, these things, struts. Gosh, it's been too long since I've used struts for anything. I mostly build without them, especially with the ability to use auto strut features. Oh yes, the upper stage is comprised of two of the, I believe these are called the Wolfhound, Wolfhound engines, because they have very good outer space ISP. So right now on the Delta V, you can see it only says 3,021 meters per second, and a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.5 on the first stage, and only 0.2 on the second stage. But that first stage is going to get us into pretty much vacuum, and at vacuum the second stage jumps up to a whopping TWR of 1.09 and 2,680 meters per second. So I feel that is sufficient to get these into orbit. This isn't 1,000 and something parts craft. It's 256 times 4 for every single satellite, and then another 20 or so parts for the rocket. And I've actually been outdone already. I posted about this on the Kerbal Space Program subreddit. Often while recording these videos, I will say a statement across scene transitions, but that one took literally so long, I have no idea what I was trying to say. But this was done in order to outdo someone who posted about doing the same thing, only with 200 satellites. And I normally do live commentary, but this will be fast-forwarded relative to my voice, because as you can see, the launch is going extremely, well, actually to you it looks like it's going at a normal speed, relatively speaking, but to me, it is lagging like hell. Someone posted about India's satellite launch and suggested that us playing Kerbal Space Program should try to beat this record. And someone immediately responded that they had a design to do 200 satellites. So I was like, okay, I'll just go over that a little bit, and it just so happened that I found a way to fit 16 on one layer and doubled that a few times and got to 256. And I don't want to go further than this because my computer will melt. It's already melting just processing this one. However, like I said, I was immediately outdone by someone who did 540 satellites, and then someone after that did a launch that did over 1,000 satellites. The one with 540, they decided not to launch it because it would be too painful, but the one that has over 1,000 definitely has been. I don't need to throttle down. I started throttling down a little bit, but I realized that was actually probably a very bad idea at this early in the stage, in the game, in the launch, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. And in fact, the staging menu, there's so many of these groupings of decouplers and SRBs that the staging takes literally minutes to scroll through, which is pretty crazy. I do love how that we get a thrust-to-weight ratio for the payload fairing being deployed. I think that's just kind of funny. In any case, from my time point, we're still heading up. From your standpoint, probably tilting over a little bit already. My goal for this launch is a roughly 80-kilometer orbit, but we'll see how that actually goes. I've also calculated the time it will take to deploy all these satellites ahead of time. It will take at least half an hour. It will take 31 minutes, assuming I can deploy every satellite every 7 seconds. But I doubt I can do it that fast, especially with lag. And the staging, as you might have guessed, is not set up to actually deploy these things in an orderly fashion. Instead, I will be manually selecting and firing decouplers and sepatrons to launch these satellites into their final orbits. So, yeah, definitely a lot going on. And as you can see, that first stage nearly got us to orbit. And the second stage is actually a little overpowered, but this is fine by me. I think this is a good way to go about things. Overpowered means you have more room for potential errors to happen during flight, and you can recover from them easily. I am not very good at flying rockets in KSP, and I'm not very good at designing them, but I know enough to make something work. Let me rephrase that. I'm not good at designing super efficient things, but I'm good at designing things that work. And sometimes that's all you need. And because of the low throttle we're at, and high altitude, we had a clean separation of the payload fairing, although there was a slight loss of control stability for an unknown reason immediately after fairing separation. The key aspect I want to point out about how and why I am throttling down at this stage of the ascent is that, if you'll notice, our apoapsis is not quite at the 80-kilometer goal. However, we are very, very slowly approaching our apoapsis, and it is crawling up very slowly. If I throttled up more, it would be somewhat less efficient, or at least I believe it would be somewhat less efficient, because I would have to go up to apoapsis quicker and accelerate more at apoapsis. In fact, I'm throttling it down even lower now, because I essentially want to reach apoapsis around the same time I'm reaching orbital speed. Fortunately, that's not going to work. In fact, I may need to cut the engine entirely to do that, or I may go into a different orbit than the target orbit. As much as I selected 80 kilometers as a target orbit, it's probably not actually an ideal target orbit, because depending on how these satellites are launched, they have a good deal of delta V on them individually when they are launched, and I could very easily accidentally deorbit them if they're operating at only 80 kilometers when launched from the base vehicle. I could, of course, plan the way they are launched carefully to avoid such circumstances, but my intent with this mission is to launch them as effectively as quickly as possible, so this really isn't what we want to be doing. As you can see, the craft is unable to maneuver without applying thrust. Therefore, I'm having to slightly dislodge my orbit from its intended trajectory in order to effect movement. But this should be no worry whatsoever. As you can see, I am now aiming to circularize around 100 kilometers apoapsis. I've learned over time that I need not be so precise about orbits in KSP as I previously tried to be. Especially when dealing with something with such a high part count, it's just not necessary. That's also why these satellites are going to be launched in a haphazard manner using SRBs. It's simply not worth the effort to try to do better than that. And as I said, I'm not particularly caring about the exact arrangement of the orbit, so we're actually ending up in a 98.8 by 112.4 kilometer apoapsis. I mean orbit. And I'm actually going to warp around to the sunlight before we begin deploying satellites so that it is more visible. I don't know why I decided to say it like that. Anyhow, now that we are clearly in sunlight, it is time to begin the process of launching these. Now, the way I've decided I will go about launching... Oops, I accidentally hit shift for a moment. That would not have been good. First, I'm going to... Where's the button I'm looking for? Aim camera. There it is. So now we're aiming the camera at the front of the ship. Still not the best lighting conditions at this moment, but we'll make do. Now, that is decoupler, and the SRB that corresponds to that particular... There we go, the sepatron that corresponds to that particular launcher is there. And so what I will do is very quickly activate the engine and then decouple the decoupler. Come on. No, do it before it blows up. Okay, that does not appear to have gone correctly at all. Interesting. I believe I've activated the wrong decoupler for what I was intending to do. Let's switch to the smaller... No, the correct Sepratron was activated. It just didn't actually have any effect, which is interesting, because that now implies that I'm going to have to decouple these independently and then fire their Sepratrons after doing that, which is not great, and I don't know why it's... Well, it's very laggy, that's why. I was about to say, I don't know why it's not doing things more effectively, but it looks like I'm going to have to sit here and individually decouple all of these. Is that the way they're stacked is not very conducive to them actually separating. Only slight. I'm sure it'll be fine. Nothing bad can possibly go wrong. As you can see, some stacks are more stable than others, unfortunately. Whoops, that was an inner stack one. I meant to save those for last, because they clearly will have extra difficulty decoupling from this craft. Ah, there we go. I didn't have F4 enabled. I was wondering why you didn't see, you know, tons of them everywhere. Yeah, that's a lot. And with the exception of one from the core stack, I believe, yes, we have deployed, out of 256, we have deployed all but 256 divided by 4? I don't know, whatever. I can't. I don't want to math right now. This has been a very long process. Now for the fun part, where we go through every single satellite and hit stage in order to deploy their Sepratrons. Well shit, that one just deorbited. Yeah, I definitely gave these still way too much thrust. Hey, this one's nearly straight on prograde, so... Whee! I'm an idiot, because of course the alignment down here is not the same as the alignment of the actual thruster. So whoops, that's another one deorbited. The whole network, you can see, is highly concentrated right now, because these things have just been launched. Really don't think it's worth the effort of trying to go ahead and spread the rest out, especially with the high amount of lag. This is more of a proof of concept and also why you don't do this in KSP. I don't think I will launch more than 20 satellites at once from now on, because just look at this mess. It's beautiful, but it's a mess. I can't even scroll in any further. Is it just because it's frozen? No, I literally can't even, it won't let me scroll in further. That's sad. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed. This video actually took, gosh, let's see. I've been recording for, oh, that's where it's, yeah, I've been recording for over an hour. Gosh, this was slow.